Emisión.net.
Hello again and welcome to Letter from England, broadcasting for AC Press under the auspices of the Spanish Evangelical Alliance. My name is Jonathan Dawson. One of the ideas when we began this broadcast was to look at the news in Spain from afar, perhaps to compare or contrast the vision of whatever the situation was, or of the news itself, from England. Well, this week, the world's oldest profession, so-called prostitution, is in the news, because a proposal to legalize it is before the Spanish Parliament and is polarizing opinion. Look at it from a country with a more liberal tradition, and yet a country which hasn't so far seen fit to legalize prostitution, makes for an interesting angle on the news. Prostitution has rightly always had a bad press. It's immoral, it's unpleasant, and it's often dangerous for the people involved. It cheapens one of God's good gifts to humanity and makes money out of something which is supposed to be reserved for the intimacy of a loving relationship. And yet it happens. So in a fallen world, what should governments do, and what support, if any, should Christians give to government policy on this issue? Indeed, what policy should be pursued? There is often a darker side, if that can be put that way. There's hardly a brighter side to it, but there's a worse side to it in which people get abused, enslaved, and sometimes even killed. So should it be legalized? The argument goes that this would protect the women involved in prostitution. It would enable the police to control, perhaps in a more effective way, to ensure that working conditions were reasonable. Prostitutes would be paid, as is the case in some countries already, national insurance, or would pay national insurance and be therefore covered by the state as any other workers, and so on. But would actually that help? Well, whilst the central government in Madrid is debating the issue, politicians in Catalonia are a step ahead and ready to pass a bill regulating prostitution in their region. Now, the debate has come to the fore over allegations that many women are being forced into prostitution in Germany during the World Cup, most of them from Eastern Europe. Indeed, some people have calculated that between 30,000 and 60,000 women will have come to Germany during the World Cup, many of them believing they're going to be waitresses or hotel cleaners, and then being forced into prostitution. This includes girls as young as 14. Well, what of the proposal in Spain? Obviously this debate has brought the issue to the public eye. Well, prostitution in Spain as well has increased notably in the last few years. It's estimated that there are around 300,000 sex workers in the country today, the majority of whom come from Eastern Europe or Latin America. And there are two schools of thought on the issue. The abolitionists argue that it is sexual exploitation, a case of gender violence, and therefore should be pursued and eradicated as much as is possible by the authorities. On the other side of the debate, the legalizationists, however, say that women should be free to choose this line of work if they wish, and that certain minimum working conditions should be enforced. Countries, as I mentioned earlier, such as Holland and Germany, have passed laws giving certain rights to prostitutes, and laws which also offer them some protection. Interestingly, the bill in Catalonia doesn't actually refer to prostitution as a profession, but as paid sexual services, which perhaps is a more accurate way of describing it, following an edict from the Court of Luxembourg to that effect. Human trafficking is illegal throughout the European Union, as is anything which is deemed to be exploitation. The operation of pimps and the gangs which often force women into prostitution are illegal as well. Now, women's groups tend to argue against all kinds of prostitution on the grounds that it threatens women's health and quality of life, and as I said earlier, they claim it represents a kind of gender violence. Well, certainly that is true when women are forced into it, against their will, but what of those who freely choose it? The Platform for the Abolition of Prostitution considers that regulate means legalize, and that one cannot legalize the fact of putting a price on a woman's body. Other groups think the move would lead to the exploitation of prostitutes as well. So as Christians, how do we respond to this? Well, clearly we're against prostitution. Clearly we believe that sexual activity should be reserved for the intimacy of the marriage relationship. But in a fallen world, we have to reckon with the fact that many activities of which we do not approve go on. So the issue perhaps becomes more pragmatic. Would the legalization of prostitution actually help? Would it do away with the gangs and with the enslavement and with the forced prostitution? This is very unlikely, because the reason for that business is quite simply money. And whereas a legalized prostitute, working, as it were, from her own brothel, or whatever we want to call it, might be protected, there will be many, many other women who will be forced into it just as now. Perhaps the police could and should do more to track down and arrest and dismantle these gangs. Probably they are already doing as much as they can in many places. And I suspect that legalizing prostitution would actually have two very unhelpful results. One, it would push this gang and enforced prostitution activity even more underground than it is now. And secondly, it would make, if I dare use the expression, the more mainstream prostitution socially acceptable. In this instance, it's very worrying to hear that a political party has been formed just in the last few days in Holland with the aim of legalizing child pornography. The day may be not too far away when the argument to legalize paedophilia becomes as mainstream as the argument to legalize prostitution. And really, once we shift from the absolute of a moral good dictated by a sovereign God, then we're on a slippery slope to allowing anything into this new morality, or perhaps as really it ought to be called the new immorality. So I don't think legalizing prostitution is the right way to go. And there are many Christian and other organizations working with women involved in this profession, even those who are doing it willingly, to try and encourage them to find a better and more healthy way to make a living. Thank you for listening to Letter from England, broadcasting on emission.net each week. Goodbye for now.
Emisión.net